From 1972 to 1981, the National Air and Space Museum produced 100 postal cachets, each one commemorating a milestone of flight. In this series of slideshow videos, we're going to talk briefly about each milestone they chose, and some they didn't. We'll also talk briefly about any interesting postal history on each cachet. The earliest milestone commemorated in the NASM series was the 195th anniversary of the first crossing of the English Channel by air. On January 7, 1785, Frenchman Jean-Pierre Blanchard and American John Jeffries launched their hydrogen balloon from Dover, England, and floated 21 miles across the English Channel to Calais, France. 2 years prior to this channel crossing are two milestones we'd like to mention. In 1783, Joseph and Etienne Montgolfier, wealthy French paper manufacturers, invented the hot air balloon. Their gigantic balloons were constructed of several thin layers of paper covered in sackcloth. A brazier with an open fire beneath the balloon opening provided the hot air needed to fill it and then to keep it aloft. A couple of experimental tethered balloon flights were made, using first animals and then a human pilot. On August 27, 1783, the first free flight of a manned hot air balloon took place. When the Montgolfiers' countryman Jacques Charles learned of their experiments, he began working on a balloon that would be lifted by hydrogen. At this time, hydrogen for balloons was created by pouring sulfuric acid onto scrap iron, a lot of scrap iron. The resultant gas was then piped straight into a silk balloon that had been coated with rubber, which made the balloon impermeable. It took about 24 hours to fill a balloon large enough to be able to carry men. On December 1st, 1783, the first free flight of a hydrogen balloon took place. A hot air balloon could be filled in minutes, but it needed a constant supply of hot air from a fire in the brazier to stay aloft. This made it rather dangerous. It took a lot longer for a hydrogen balloon to be filled, but once it was filled, it could float indefinitely, unless the balloon developed a leak. That was the case with the channel crossing of Blanchard and Jeffries. Their flight took place on a cold, windy winter day. Halfway across, the balloon must have developed a slow leak, and for a time they floated just a few feet above the water before a favorable wind lifted them higher. This milestone of flight cachet, number 83 in the series, was cancelled in Dover, England on January 7, 1980. The insert was one double-sided sheet which told the story of the two men and their flight. Jean-Pierre Blanchard was a showman who made a living giving balloon demonstrations in France, England, and the United States. John Jeffries, an American surgeon who had put up the money for this particular flight, was a loyalist who had fled to England after the American Revolution. He was also a scientist, interested in what later would be called meteorology. He had intended to take weather measurements during the trip across the channel, but unfortunately his scientific instruments had to be jettisoned, along with ballast and anything else that could be tossed overboard, to keep the balloon in the air after it had begun losing buoyancy. The stamp on this cachet honors Rowland Hill and was first issued in England in 1979. Hill is best known as the reformer of the British postal system. Up until 1840, it was the recipient of a piece of mail who had to pay for it, not the sender, and the cost depended on how far the letter had to travel. One of Hill's reforms was to make the cost of a letter uniform regardless of the distance it had to go. In addition, the sender would be the one who would have to purchase a stamp in order to mail the letter. The first postage stamps ever made were the penny black and the 2 penny blue. Why was the Rowland Hill stamp selected for this cachet? Perhaps because John Jeffries has a connection to postal history. On his journey across the Channel, he carried a letter from another American loyalist in exile in England, William Franklin, to Franklin's son Temple, who was in France as part of the diplomatic entourage of his grandfather, Benjamin Franklin. He's therefore credited with delivering the first piece of airmail. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the Elyria University channel.